I'm a 3D artist and last week I bought a new toy.
It's a 3D printer.
So far it's been a lot of fun.
How cool does that look?
And sometimes not so fun.
This week we're going to use it to print one of my 3D characters, and I can't tell you how excited I am for that. But before we can do that, there's a few things we need to take care of first. For starters, I need to choose a character to print and then bring it into Blender so that I can check it over for potential problems, and then of course prepare it for 3D printing. Then I need to send the model to a slicing gap so that I can add supports before and then send it to the printer. But before we can do any of that, we've got to calibrate the print settings to the resin, because although the first model printed just fine, there's potentially room for improvement. If you remember from the last video, the way resin printing works is that this plate is going to move down into this vat of resin, and then a screen underneath is going to shine UV light in certain areas to harden up that layer of resin. Well, the amount of time that UV light shines at the resin is called exposure time, and little changes to this setting can have big changes to your model. If you overexpose, you might lose intricate details on the model, but if you underexpose, it might get stuck to the bottom and not print at all. So exposure time is the main setting that we're going to be looking at, but surely the manufacturers have tested this out 100 times and know exactly what it should be set at? Well, yes and no. While they do provide recommended settings, there's a lot of factors that can play into this that affect the way that your printer prints. Even things such as your room temperature can affect it. So we need to do some tests of our own. And the way I've decided to do that is using a model called the cones of calibration. And the concept is pretty simple. You print out this model which has two sides to it, a success side and a failure side. If you can get all the cones on the success side to print successfully and all the cones on the failure side to fail successfully, then your printer settings are spot on. If any of the cones on the success side fail, then you need to increase the exposure time. But if any of the cones on the failure side print, then you need to decrease the exposure time. Foolproof, right?
I imported the cones into Chitubox and found the recommended settings online, and already I've made a mistake. What I hadn't realised is that these aren't the official settings from Elegoo, but unofficial settings which I guess are submitted by the community. Blissfully unaware, I start changing the print settings to match my resin. The exposure time was the same as default, but without really knowing what it meant, I changed the bottom exposure time from 35 seconds to 16. I then changed the lifting speed to 50, which determines how quickly the build plate lifts away from the FEP. It was time to take it to the printer for testing, but then I noticed something a little strange.
So I just noticed something here that if you look at that resin, that does not look level. If you look in that corner and then that corner, I don't know if my eyes are playing tricks on me or what, if it's just the light, but that doesn't look right. I'm gonna have to have a little look at this. Yeah, so on the floor, it does actually look a lot more level. So this print is happening on the floor. So the 3D print is now done. It is finished, and let's have a look. Well, that looks a bit worrying. There doesn't appear to be anything there at all.
I was going to have to clean out the vat again, but I still don't have a funnel yet. But what I do have is a jug. This was a lot easier than trying to use one of those paper filter funnel things. After cleaning out the vat, I found a little present.
So it seems as though it's just stuck to the bottom there. So I'll need to go and figure out why that's happened. That is a shame though. I'm guessing it's something to do with the initial exposure time. That's my guess, because I did change that and it was quite different to where it was at as well. So maybe I need to tweak that. I'll go and have a look.
So after cleaning it out, I decided that I'm going to move everything into my office. Now, I know a lot of you have been concerned about safety with the fumes and everything, but I promise that that is going to get addressed in next week's video. I then changed the bottom exposure time to 40 and tried printing the model again. So the print has just finished, and I don't know how well you can see under there, but it does seem to have worked this time. Let's take this cover off so that we can see this properly. Have a look inside there. Can't quite focus on it, but it does seem like it's worked. So let's get this out. I've got my wash over here, my cure here. Sorry, that is horribly overexposed. I do apologise. Let's get this washed and see if this is printed as it should. So that test did end up with 3 cones on the failure side, so I've got to reduce my exposure test. So I've run a bunch of tests since and had a lot of failures. And the main takeaway I can give you, if you're going to try this for yourself, is maybe try a different calibration test first, because these cones take 50 minutes to print. So if you're getting failures, you're wasting a lot of time. Whereas this test by Frozen only takes 10 minutes. Now, it's not as foolproof as the cones, it's a bit more subjective. You've got to use your eyes to judge which is the best print. But once you've got it in the ballpark, you can always switch over to the cones after that and save yourself a lot of time. Now, for me personally, my printer, my resin, my surroundings, the ideal setting seems to be an exposure time of 2.3. So now I think we can move on to looking at printing an actual character. Oh, and I bought a funnel. So as you've probably gathered by now, this is the model that I ended up printing. Now initially I did consider going with the Amy Winehouse piece because I do like that and I do think it'd look nice printed, but I felt like this one was a bit more finished and also lends itself more to 3D printing because we've got like a lot of thick parts and everything's quite simple, so nothing too complicated for the printer. So this is the one I went with. Now when I prepared this for 3D printing, I did actually talk through the process, but I recorded it in the morning, so I was just kind of mumbling through it. So I've decided to come back through again and just explain what I've done. So over here is the model that I started with, and if you wanted to see how I created that from scratch, then check out the video. I'll put a card in the corner of this YouTube video now, linking to the time lapse where I created this piece. So over here is a result of that, and then on this side is what I've done to it. So essentially we ended up with 2 pieces. So we have the hair. I joined all the hair together so that that's all one piece, and then I joined all these other pieces together. But in Blender you can't actually see that because I did run into issues with polycount and ended up having to send it to Zbrush, but that is what I ended up doing. Now I do think when I come to finally printing this, so the print that I have done is just a test print. I haven't been meticulous with the preparation of this because I just wanted to run through the process first just to get a feel for how things are working and what I might want to focus on. But I do intend to do a full body print of this eventually. And when I come to do that, I do actually want these legs separate and the arms separate from the clothing here, just to make it easier to paint, because I do intend to paint it as well, but that is a future video. So what I've done then is I joined up all the hair and I joined up all the other pieces, so it's just going to be 2 pieces. And I didn't key the hair or anything because what I ended up doing is subtracting the head from the hair with a boolean, and when I did that it just kind of slots nicely on top of it, so I didn't need to mess around with keys or anything like that. Another thing I did was, so this shirt, if I just solo out this shirt, you can see that it did have some thickness to it, but I didn't want to print it like that. So what I did was I applied the modifier for this thickness. Let me just do this again here so you can see. I actually made it a little bit thicker as well. So I made it a little bit thicker like that, just to make it a bit better on the printer. Applied that modifier, and then I came in here and deleted a poly loop like that. And then I did the same on this side. I don't know why it's all blue. I think I probably need to sort the edge creasing out or something. Let's just get rid of that. And then the same up here. So you can kind of guess what I'm doing here. Delete that loop, and then the same down here. And then just got rid of that centerpiece. And then I could come in and go around to each of these edges, hit extrude, and then merge at the center, and just cap all of these things off. And you can see that over here. So everything's capped off, so that arm now slots nicely into that shirt. and then when I do come to print this in pieces, I should be able to slot that arm into the shirt nice and easy. And the same thing for these legs as well. I will need to adjust this a bit because there is a bit of clipping there, but that is the final intention there. And then of course I added a base, which I didn't end up printing because, as I say, it is just a test print. I just wanted to see how everything works, but that will help keep it balanced eventually. I'll probably want to make it a little bit bigger actually, because that hair is pretty big, so it does knock the figure off balance. Another thing I did was just delete these earrings because I figured they're going to be really tiny and really thin and probably going to snap off when I remove the supports anyway. So I kept the studs there like that, but deleted those heart parts. I don't know if I'm going to include them in the final print or not yet. We'll see. Oh, I also deleted these because you can't print floating objects with a 3D printer, obviously. And then I just went around the model, just making sure everything's tight to the shirt, so you can see there how that's floating. So I just made sure everything sort of intersected. And then eventually I brought it into Zbrush, where I dynameshed everything together so everything was one piece. I'm not entirely sure if you need to do that. That's something I haven't actually yet researched, but I did it anyway. Just made sure it was all one piece, well, two pieces. So I dynameshed the hair and then I dynameshed the body, so they were just complete pieces. And then, as I say, I subtract boolean the head from the hair so that I could slot the hair onto the head once it was printed. And that's essentially it. I didn't do very much else in terms of preparing the model, although obviously I did then send it to the slicer in order to add supports and of course slice the model and just check that everything was working there. So the next thing I did was import the models into Chitubox. Now I know some of you are going to mention Lychee, and I can tell you that I have already downloaded it and I do like it, so I'm going to move on to that, but for now I'm just using Chitubox. And the first thing I notice is that the models are tiny, so obviously I scale them up. Now I am just eyeballing the scale here, but I do bring in the cones of calibration just to help me out with that. I figured if the head was about the size of the cones, then that should be about right, but in future models I will be a bit more precise about this. I then tilted the models backwards, and this is a common practice in 3D resin printing, and it's to do with the peel forces and stopping it getting stuck to the bottom. But I'm aware that this model is going to be quite small and it's going to be hollowed out too, so I'm not too concerned with that. It was just so that the majority of the supports will be at the back of the model where they won't be seen, because they do leave a little mark. Then I used the hollow tools to hollow out the models and just check them over, and I'm not entirely sure what I'm looking for here. When I brought them into Lychee after I printed the model, it did complain about some issues, so this probably isn't perfect, but you know what, I'm just running with it for now. I just want to get my first model printed. And then I added a few holes, because when you hollow out models you need some holes to let the resin drain out, otherwise if it gets stuck in there it can cause issues further down the line. Now I might have gone a little bit overboard with this. I did add in quite a few holes just to make sure that I could get that resin out. I wasn't too concerned with the placement, but I did put them around the back where they can't be seen. After all, I do want a pretty picture for Instagram, obviously. Now, I didn't add infill into the model because I'd read that this can cause issues when trying to drain out the resin later, but I did use auto supports that will add supports inside the model as well. Now, I know that the general consensus is that it's best to create your own supports, but as I say, I just wanted to get this thing printed. Now, the settings that I used for the auto supports were heavy supports at 70% density, and then I just came through with light and medium supports, just putting them in areas that I felt needed a little bit extra, but obviously I don't feel like I'm experienced enough at this point to really make that call. I just figured that more supports is better than fewer supports, than risk, you know, having a failed print. And I'm happy enough now to send it off to the printer. This could either go really well or it could fail miserably, but there's only one way we can find out. So this 3D print of my character has just been going for a couple of hours, and it did stick to the build plate, as you can see, but it also stuck to, let's just check, yeah, it also stuck
to the FEP. So I don't really know why it's failed there. It must have broken away at some point. It's quite disappointing because that's like a couple of hours now that I've just lost. It's quite frustrating, but it's fine. We're going to work this out. We're going to suss it out. It's still the first week. We're going to have issues. That's what I keep telling myself. Just got to figure this out.
I attempted to fix this problem by lowering the lift speed, since the slower it lifts, the less likely it is to rip away like it did, and then sent it to print again. Okay, this character has just finished printing right now. We're gonna see the results of this together. I am excited. Let me just take the cover off. Oh, well, something's printed. Just raise it up a bit more. Look at that. It does. It looks like we've got a few broken supports in there, so that's not good, but let's see how it did.
I can't tell you how beyond excited I am for this. I kind of feel like something might have failed looking at those supports, but look at this. Okay, so yeah, we definitely do have some problems. There's quite a big chunk of the hair not printed here because the supports didn't work, I guess. Yeah, some of the supports have failed, unfortunately. The main character looks spot on though. Looks really good. See if you can see that. And the hair, you can kind of see the hair here, so there's a chunk missing from there, which is a shame, but for a first test print, you know what, I'm pleased with how it's come up. So I'm gonna get this cleaned, see if the hair actually nicely fits on top of the head, and yeah.
And this is the final result. Look at it. It looks so good. Oh, I love it. I mean, it's obviously got its issues, like this piece of the hair did snap here. And there are a few skinny pieces, such as like the fingers and a little bit on the clothing that has broken off a little bit, but we can solve that in the next print, I'm sure. But also, where the supports failed, it does look a little bit messy around the back. I haven't sanded this down or anything, I haven't cleaned anything up, so there's also little marks where the supports have been as well, but I'm not too concerned about that. That can be cleaned up quite easily. And the hair slots on better than I expected it to be honest. It just slots nicely in there, so that worked really well. I was really pleased with that, and all in all, I'm really happy with it. You know, I've learned loads from this that I'm going to take into the next print, which is going to be the same character, but I'm going to do the full body. I'll probably do it a little bit bigger, because even though I added quite a few drain holes, because the figure's so small, the resin did struggle to drain out a little bit. And yeah, I'm going to make a few more things thicker, and I'm also going to cut it all out into pieces so that it can be painted easier. But yeah, really pleased with it, and thank you for watching this far. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to give it a like for that algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already for future content, and I'll see you in the next one. The next one's going to be fun. Alright, peace. And that is a much cleaner way of doing it. And look, we have yet another one of these square pieces. Does anyone want to buy them? I don't really know what to do with them. For a good price of £50, it's yours. Thank you.